my main point is, if you take a group and you just assault their culture for 80 years or 90 years, over generations, that those things that we know languages have to have, context, intergenerational transfer, registers, if you take those things out and you make it simple, that the flip side of the coin is the cultural entropy arises. And that's why we have a hard time having group conversations about difficult topics. That's why every AGM ends in a screaming match. That's why when a difficult issue comes up, people sit down and they just get worked up and they get upset. And by the time they raise up their hand, it's in a fist. And by the time they say their question, they're yelling at people, and then everyone gets hurt feelings about that. That's absolutely got to change. If not for us, for this little girl, for my daughter, or anyone that wants to be a part of something later on. My main argument is the more information we take and we give back to the community, the more we can manage that cultural entropy. And it doesn't mean I'm going to give you those 13 articles back there, and then tomorrow we're not ever going to argue again. But even looking at this one document here, we're getting ready for New Year's coming up. Here's just one document that I've got. I haven't even read it. I don't even know where it came from. So people ask me, oh, what's this one for? I don't know. But I know by the end of this, we'll all know a little bit more about it. Hopefully we'll know maybe where it came from. But more importantly, it's not just what I think about it, or what Herman thinks about it, or what Muggs thinks about it, or which spelling errors so-and-so found. But it becomes this mediated item that everyone negotiates and everyone owns. If we take that information and we put it back in the community, we can address that cultural entropy. So that's what I'm going to talk about. If anybody wants to leave right now, that would probably be okay. But I think it's going to be a really worthwhile conversation. I think 5 years ago we couldn't have had this conversation. I think that complementary to this discussion, there are ongoing discussions about post-traumatic stress disorder and with our military folk, with survivors of trauma, with survivors of childhood sexual abuse, with survivors of the residential school. People that have been dispossessed and discounted are starting to go through some of these processes. Some of you know that every year, right before New Year's, I have a different kind of ceremony. Every year, right around Christmas time, I get our people together and want to talk about making our culture stronger, our language more precise, to make our people more grounded in their ways. Last year, we used language and linguistics, and this year I thought this might be a better way to do it. This is a little bit bulky. Sure, it's great if we can have it and I can sit down and I can read it, but it's a lot harder for me to make 30 copies of that and give it out. But we have all of these as PDFs now. I can email this to you. You can look at it. You can attach a note, and you can email it back to me, and I have a master. And now, where we used to have these conversations with 17 people with hundreds of posts, now we have a document. Not even written by us, but now we can take ownership of that again. We can have our notes. We can have our criticisms. We can have our suggestions for what's right or what needs to be talked about right in this document. So when the next person looks at it and they're on their computer and they flip through, they get to page 32, they can see, oh, 4 community members say that this is a little bit suspect. It's not. One of the ones we have is a Carlene Maloof and Thane White from 1956. And when we were doing the interviews with especially the elders from the Flathead, Muggs and Adeline and Helen and all of them, first off said, yeah, if those names are on there, we pretty much would just, we would tell them whatever they wanted to hear because they just kept coming up. So when I was sitting and talking with one of our Kootenai people that is a child psychologist and another one that is studying some other kind of scientific aspects of childhood development, and they said, oh, what about this Maloof and White? Is that a good resource? Automatically at the table, I remembered the things that were said, and I was like, yeah, there's some stuff, but for the most part, you would probably want to have some people look at it before you took it as truth. And so people ask me to come up with an idea of how to fix that. I figured you just digitize it, you let everyone look at it, you let 20 people weigh in and have notes on it. Not any one of them is correct. Not anything that I say is correct. Not anything that Mug says is correct. Not anything that Herman says is correct. Definitely nothing Don says is correct. But you take them all together. It's called crowdsourcing. There was an interesting experiment. They do it all the time and it amazes people. You take a jar full of jelly beans and you have 15,000 people guess how many jelly beans are in here. And you can have people that are experts in metrics and measuring things. And at the end of the day, the people that are the experts are no closer than somebody that just guesses. But when they take the average of every one of those guesses, they are always dead on. Culture doesn't belong to any one person, and no one person has the right to say this is mine. Culture belongs to everyone that participates in it. And that's scary because we know there's some people that don't know what they're talking about. That's why we don't just let them do it. That's why we deal a little bit with the things that keep us from contributing. And I know it's difficult. I don't know how many interviews with elders I've done where they end in tears because people are afraid. I love this. I want to talk about this. I'm afraid it's being recorded because in 10 years I don't want someone to take my words out of context. That's the opposite of what we're doing here. We're trying to add context back in. So I know it's a little bit of a step, especially for some of you that have been working on our language and culture programs for a long time. Nothing that I'm saying here today goes against what you've done. Nothing that I'm saying here today says that any of the other projects anyone else is doing is wrong. Everything that I'm saying here today is the idea that the more of us that know about it and want to know about it, the more we interact, the more this thing that we have that we all take part in lives. Because I can go home to Spokane and not ever open another PDF and not ever care. But that's just not really who I am, and that's not really the result of the interviews that I've done. And as an organizational theorist and a leadership theorist, it's all a big experiment for me. I want to see if we can find ways to make things stronger. And I think the fact that we have a nice group of people, we have even more coming from some elders, intergenerational, we have some of their younger relatives. We have some people that work here in this building, we have other people that just wanted to be